Hi, I'm going to continue talking to you about social emotional development in the infant and toddler years and then later in the adolescent years. And one of the key concepts that we start out with as caregivers, as educators of infants and toddlers, we would want to be responsive to them in helping them to grow and develop and learn. And what that responsiveness does is we're checking to see if when they cry, if they're hungry, if they're thirsty, if they need to have their diaper changed, or if they need a nap, what's going on. We're going to be responsive to whatever information that they're expressing to us. And what that does is it gives them that kind of stable foundation to know that their needs are going to be met. And when their basic needs are met, they're going to be able to move into security with their emotions. So emotional security. Knowing that those close relationships with the adults are sensitive to each of their needs. And so we're going to see how the infant and toddlers, as they grow, we're going to see some similarities throughout their life about the way that they experience new situations, relate to others, relate to objects, all types of relations that we're going to see them express through their temperament. And that's going to be widely influenced by their culture. It's going to be some nonverbal things that are taught by their caregivers, as well as some verbal things. And really it's just the flavor of their emotional expression and how they approach things. So they might be a baby that cries all the time, and then maybe later in the toddler years you're going to see them screaming and being upset a lot of the time. And maybe they're a baby that's very calm and happy and cooling and laughing a lot. As an infant, in the toddlerhood, you're also going to see them very calm and happy, and even in new situations, maybe feeling very safe and secure. So the next line down with effective, we're going to use a tone of voice that's very gentle and kind. And tone of voice is not the only thing for effective, but there's a lot of nonverbal emotional expression that goes behind that and supports it. So when a child is in trouble, or when a child is just sitting there, the tone of voice can really impact the child. So it's really important as educators, as caregivers, to use a very kind and gentle and compassionate tone of voice. Children, as they grow into toddlerhood, they're going to be hopefully developing empathy, and if not, hopefully we're teaching empathy. And that's when they look outside of themselves and start to understand others' feelings. Now, once they start to understand others' feelings, and then they can also understand that they have their own feelings about things. And so that might be when a child is watching another person cry, and they ask the caregiver or the educator or the mom or whatever, what's going on? What's happening? And you're able to tell the child, that their toy was taken from them, or that their mom left them and they're sad, they're waiting for her to come back home. But that child's also able to accept that and not take it on as their own. So it's a really important thing to develop, and it keeps developing throughout all of the years as we can develop out of our egocentric nature. Self-efficacy and sense of self, realizing who I am, and that's really through cause and effect, and they start to learn their sense of self, that when I pedal the bike, it moves, and I'm making it move, or the infants do that as well when they're shaking the rattle. They're looking up and they're seeing the rattle shake, and hopefully those cognitions are connecting and making some kind of sense that their arm or their foot is what's moving, whatever they're pushing or pulling or shaking. And some other examples would be in the toddler years when they're drawing with their crayon on a piece of paper, and they hold it up and show you with excitement. And you can reinforce that, and you can tell them, who made that paper? Who made that beautiful picture? And hopefully when they become more verbal, they'll be able to say, I made it, so they really know who they are and what they can do, and they start to feel more confident about those things that they're doing. Emotional regulation comes along with their development in the early years, and that's how they feel combined with how they think. It's all combined together, and then it's expressed through how they react. And so emotional regulation can be easy for some children, and then again, it can be really challenging. So it's really a great foundation to have if you can have educators and caregivers around the child that are supporting positive emotional regulation, so that and redirection, so that as the child grows up, they've learned how to do that early on. It's hugely important to learn how to emotionally regulate yourself even as you're getting older. So it is for the infant and toddlers that we're talking about right now, but it is true through all of the ages. So impulse control, same thing. That's where the infants and toddlers are learning to wait, to stop, and to follow, and they're using everything that they have to control their behavior, so that they're not they're not impulsively grabbing a toy that they want. They're waiting and asking if they can have a turn, or grabbing food from someone else's area that they're waiting and asking if that person would like to share with them. And they're able to stop and follow the teacher, or follow the educator, or follow the caregiver, and control their behavior. And so that's also something that we can help children learn, and we can help teach that through some redirection. And if they're having problems impulsively grabbing something, then give them something to hold in their hand, so that they don't need to feel that they need to grab something. And that is one of the strategies that can help take care of some of that impulsiveness. The next term would be social understanding. Adults teach about the thoughts and emotions of others. So that goes back to that empathy, really, where we are, as educators, as caregivers, as teachers, we are teaching the children, the infants and toddlers, how to understand other people around them. And we really need to work at making them aware of that, because I don't think that it's a hugely natural concept for the children to get. It's something that needs to be taught, and we as adults need to teach that to them, and it helps them to differentiate themselves out from the other child, and to be able to that empathy would be that first foundation to start creating the compassion in the other child. So now we're going to talk about in the teenage years. What do all these terms look like in the teenage years? Let's see if we can get that screen up. Social emotional development, older students that we might have in our classes if we're in maybe middle school or high school. If they've had the responsive caregiving and they're surrounded by it, their academic performance would be better. And that makes sense, right? You're an adult, you're a caregiver, you're investing in the child. That's really increasing their self-esteem, it's increasing their confidence in who they are. They're feeling important, and there you go. They're wanting to do well in their academics. So they're wanting, it's important to them, and they know it's important to you as well. Emotional security, they're stepping stones to the relationship. So if they're feeling emotionally secure with themselves, they're able to step out into intimate relationships. They're starting to play with those a little bit, and maybe have a girlfriend here, or a close friend over here. Or maybe that wasn't met early on, so maybe they're going to kind of be stuck over here and withdrawing and isolated. And so that's where we as caregivers and educators really need to pull those kids out that we see when they're older students, if we see them kind of alone and by themselves. So that we really need to pull them in and help them and give them some support so that they can really start to work on their emotional security. Temperament is something that the infant toddler expresses. And we talked about it before as being kind of a flavor of how we deal with new situations. And this flavor does continue. It continues all the way through adulthood and until the end of time. And that temperament can affect, if you see the toddler who says no, 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 and they're crying and they're upset at new situations, at things that change that they don't care for, not getting what they want, that can really come out in the teens. And it looks just the same. It's just there's a bigger body exhibiting the behavior. And so when you see that in older students, it's really important to support them and to practice the positive, effective tone of voice, that emotional regulation, and showing them how to use impulse control. And so those terms we talked about before earlier, and you can see it again in the teens, where now all of the things that you as a caregiver, educator, or adult have poured into that child, those things are going to bubble to the surface as well. So if they've been talked to in a positive or a negative tone of voice, they're going to be talking that way to their peers, to their teachers, and that might get them in trouble, or it might get them high points. So the empathy would be very important for them to have learned early on, so that as they're in middle school and high school, they can care for others. Otherwise, they just really reinforce that egocentric nature about them, and that could really cause them to withdraw and isolate and just be all about themselves. But if you can really encourage them to have that empathy and to care for others, then that'll be good. So self-efficacy and the sense of self-understanding that they have their own identity and who they are in the world, that's huge for them right now. They're really trying a lot of new things. Maybe they've never gone out for swimming or water polo or soccer or baseball or tennis. They're going out for sports, and they're relating to others in those sports. They're learning rules, and that rules have consequences, and they're learning who they are in the midst of a team, who they are in the midst of a big school of like 500 children. What purpose do they have? And hopefully they get it. Hopefully they find it. And even some of the children in high school, when they have jobs, sometimes that helps them with obtaining that sense of self, and that they know who they are because they work at a grocery store, or when they know that they're a provider for their family. So emotional regulation, that's where they increase or decrease in the way they control their emotional expressions and their behaviors towards others. And we know how important that was at the infant toddler stage, and it's just as important now, if not more so, because now, as they're older, their behaviors, their expression of their emotions, if it's anger or if it's just that sullen withdrawal, those can really impact their social emotional development with their peers and with their teachers and with other people in the world. And so if they didn't learn how to control their temper tantrums, say, at 2 years old, then we might start seeing some of those in the older students, especially as their hormones come in, because it's not just all about, did they learn all of these things? There's the environmental influences that are also at work with their biological influences. So the hormones that are coming in can cause you to feel angry for no reason at all. And so it's up to you as an educator or a caregiver to help the student know that when they feel that feeling, what do they do with it? Should they take a run? Should they go relax? Should they go read a book? What are some things that will help them regulate their emotions? And it's such a critical time, because it's going to carry them over into adulthood and how they react in college or on the job. And if they don't fit in our with our social norms here, then that's going to cause them some distress later on. So impulse control is another big thing where we can see that with the older students. If they didn't get it early on, then it could lead into spending sprees and temper tantrums because they don't get what they want. There's a lot of hard things to learn in impulse control about stopping and waiting, and maybe in the classroom they have a hard time waiting to express their thoughts and ideas, and so they're the ones that blurt out, and socially that would be unacceptable, and those children can become a target for when they're an older student, they can become